Good evening, sharks. I'm God. And I'm here to offer you a 100% stake for only a 10% investment in my endeavor. What I am offering is salvation for the sins of all mankind and really restoration of creation as it was originally intended. What do you say? Will you come along with me? Hey God, so just let's go through the basics a little bit of this business idea. So how much exactly are you offering this forgiveness for? Good question. It's actually free. Oh boy. I'm not certain exactly I understand what you're trying to propose here. I mean, we aren't here just to throw money into a pit. People expect to see some sort of return on their investment. How exactly are we expected to make any kind of money? Okay, I'm going to guess you go to Joel Osteen's church. Hey God, I just want to take this maybe a little bit of a different direction. So I think what a lot of people want to see are, things for their money that meets the needs of the kids. I mean, especially with so many families out there. I mean, we want to have the best playground equipment, and we want to make certain that we have all of the great events, the getaways and prizes that, kids can enjoy and get excited about, things that really look good when we put them on Facebook and other social media pages. Are we going to be able to have something kind of like that? So, you want a daycare? Well, no, not a daycare. I'm just saying, wouldn't it make sense if for the money we had opportunities for people to be able to, drop their kids off different places so that, they can make certain that, the pastor and those people are giving them Jesus instead of us having to do it? So, you want a daycare? Yeah, I mean, basically. Okay, so the whole point of investing isn't because you're going to get something out of it. It's because I need strategic partners. It's really something I can do all of this on my own, but I'd rather have all of you come along with me. I mean, you're kind of a part of the entire plan. I mean, you guys, I don't just want to be investors. I want you to be customers of exactly what I'm offering here. So I'm looking for that strategic partnership, and really the investment is just a way to show that you're on board with the program and that you trust me. This whole thing is stupid. You're stupid. Okay, so let me tell you where I'm at. You come in here and you're trying to pitch this whole forgiveness thing. You sit here and tell us we're not necessarily going to have the services that we want. You're just kind of asking us to go along with you and even say that you don't necessarily need us. So I mean, look, is this at least going to be something that's going to be kind of easy and entertaining or fun? Actually, it's probably going to be really hard, and a lot of people are probably really not going to like you for it. Well, I'm out. And just like that, all roads lead back to Mr. Wonderful. God, I actually do understand what you're after here. You're after trying to get people to sit here and admit that you're in control of their lives. But you know what? Here's what I find so fascinating, is that you claim to be able to do all of this without any of these people and that you just want them to come along with you. And I understand that. I can actually respect that. But I would say this. How do you expect any of these people to trust you with their souls and their salvation when they can't even trust you with a few dollars every month? There are few subjects in the church today that are more taboo than that of tithing. I mean, it's something that a lot of pastors have flat out been told by their congregations. You are not to talk about offerings and tithes and what people do with their own personal money. That's their own personal business. Some churches treat money as something that is so sanctified that they won't even publish financial numbers on their church, or how much people give, or how much the total giving was of everybody in the congregation out to the public for them to see. Because after all, we don't talk about money. That's impolite. That's something that we wouldn't want to, put out there what people are doing with their cash, because that might be, seen as maybe being a little bit too convicting, or heaven forbid a church look like they're asking for money and passing the hat around. I mean, that just wouldn't be dignified. The thing is when we do that, and when we treat the subject of giving as something that we can't talk about, it actually denies us access to something that comes up time and time again in the scriptures. And that's what our money and what we do with our money says about where our heart stands. In one conversation I was having with several church members in a previous church, we were talking about what the correct amount was to give. And often that's how people think about it. They think about giving in terms of the correct amount and the incorrect amount. Our minds like to think about things in those black and white contexts. I mean, look, there are things I should say and there are things I shouldn't say. There are things I should do and there are things I shouldn't do. There are things God calls me to and things that God calls me not to do. We like thinking about things in these terms. And so we try to apply that to the subject of giving and say, how much or how little should I or can I get away with giving to God, giving to the church, giving to religious organizations, missions, ministries, whatever you choose to give to, and be a good Christian? That kind of misses the point. And this is the reason why we see so many people go to this verse that you may have heard before, 2 Corinthians 9:7. And in here, a lot of people will take this verse out of context and basically say, well, the correct amount for you to give is whatever your heart says you should give. That feels very good, and it's very self-validating. It's very, non-convicting, right? To basically say, if I don't feel like I have to give a lot, then I don't have to give a lot. And it's that simple. I'm a good little Christian. But that totally misses the context of all the verses that come before and after that one and the entire chapter prior. So here in a second, your small group, what you're actually going to read about is an example of what it means to have a heart that wants to give, a heart that's actually driven towards giving to something bigger, and what that actually says about them as an organization. So you're going to read about the church in Macedonia, what Paul has to say about them and their heart. And what I want you to think about is what implications this may have on us today, how we choose to spend our money and guard our money, and how we choose to be generous or how we choose to be guarded when it comes to our own material wealth. At the very end of the last discussion section, I asked some questions about whether we sometimes consider our giving and our tithing and our offerings as almost like an investment. And I think if we're being honest, a lot of us do treat it that way. We invest in churches, we invest in things like Young Life, we invest in, other charities and nonprofits, and we expect to see something in return. This is why so many of these organizations will offer what they call praise reports. I don't know how many of you were able to go to the Young Life fundraiser that just recently happened, but when you go, that's basically what that is. They want to sit here and they want to tell you the amazing things that God is doing in the lives of these individuals, and in a sense, that can start looking an awful lot like trying to show you a return on the investment that you're making. And to an extent you are. We do want to know that whoever we're entrusting our money to is being a good steward of those monies and that they're being used in noble ways, for something that is a higher purpose. But that can go too far. There's a difference between wanting to ensure that we are being good stewards of the money that God has entrusted to us versus miserly holding on to money because we think we can control it better. There's a nuance there that's very, very different. And that right there is one of the reasons why, especially in the American church, it becomes so hard to even have the conversation about giving and offerings. I have no doubt that there are individuals that even if I don't receive any messages about it after this particular Sunday, I have no doubt there are individuals that feel very uncomfortable even having this conversation right now, whether at home church or hub church or wherever else. It is an uncomfortable thing, but a part of that is because we have become so accustomed to controlling every aspect of our financial life. We plan everything. We sit here and put our taxes together. We're responsible for our savings and our retirement, and you have to sit here and earn everything, on your own to, provide for your family and whatnot. We crave that control over our material wealth because it's everything. It's life itself. It's our hobbies. It fuels our passions. It is the thing that basically fuels so much of what we hold near and dear. And that is precisely why it becomes so important as Christians for us to turn around and say, do we really trust God to be better than we are? Do we really trust that God is in control? Or do we need to retain that control for ourselves? There's a very real aspect of humility that takes place when it comes to how we use and how we give from our material wealth. Here in a second, you're going to read about a story that some of you may have heard many times before about the rich young ruler. But when you sit here and you read the story, what I want you to pay attention to is who this individual is. We'll sit here and sometimes call the story the rich young ruler, but don't focus on that. Focus on the fact that this was not a heathen. This was not a secular individual. This was what we would consider a good church-going person, but yet look at how Christ immediately cuts through to the area where he is the most lacking, and that is in his willingness to release control of his material wealth to a God who sure does know a whole lot better about creation than he does. I think when you have a conversation about something like giving and tithing, especially when you're doing it from the context of like a pastor to a church, it can feel like you're sitting here walking around landmines about saying, I don't want anybody to think that I'm just saying, oh, well, here, we're going to pass a plate around afterwards, and I hope that you listen to the lesson and you're going to give. But I really hope that that's not what's being taken away from this. I sincerely hope that what's being taken away from this is that we need to have hearts that are driven towards wanting to see what God can do in our lives and not how we can do better. We want to be willing to let go and to trust God with all facets of our life. And I would say this, if we have a hard time trusting God with some dollars, then how can we trust God with our everlasting soul? I mean, even at that level, when you say it out loud, it doesn't really make all that much sense. But the only difference is that I can pull out my wallet and I can hold up $1. But it's hard for us to pull out of our wallet our souls and to hold that up there. But yet that's exactly what we say we're doing with our mouths. That's exactly what we claim to be doing when we follow Christ, is that we're going to trust him with our salvation, with our souls. We're going to trust him for his sacrifice to be enough and for his plan to be good and for it to be something that is more glorious than what we could ever achieve. But yet, when we start talking about our money, when we start talking about our things, we start talking about our hobbies and all the resources that we have and maybe having to give those up, all of a sudden it becomes a little bit too real. One story that I didn't include in our small groups, but is another one that many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with, is the story of the widow's mites, where basically you have an individual who is, sitting there at the temple and they're watching, Jesus and the Pharisees are watching the scene unfold as these individuals go in front of the temple where there are these receptacles that were kind of trumpet-shaped receptacles. And what people would do in that day is they would actually go and give as much as they could. They would actually take their currency and they would try to break it down into the smallest denominations so they'd have a lot of coins. And then they'd drop them in these receptacles where they would clank and make a ton of noise. And this is why in the Bible Jesus criticizes people who give as if they are sounding the trumpets because they were trying to make a big show of it. But yet you have this individual, this poor widow. Keeping in mind, a widow in this day and age is somebody who really has no social standing, and she goes and she gives all that she has, which are these 2 coins. These 2 simple, insignificant coins, and she puts them in the trumpets. And Christ says, this woman has given more than anybody else here today because she didn't give out of her surplus as everybody else did, but she gave all that she had. I think that's what we have to ask ourselves when it comes to how we are willing to give, how we're willing to give to, again, I'll take my role in the church out of it. How you give to missionaries, to missions, how you give to Christian charities, people who are doing the work of Jesus Christ, and yes, how you give to the church. Are we giving out of our surplus, or are we giving because it's something that we have a heart to do? Are we giving because we want to demonstrate to God that I trust you with something so much more precious with my money, so I can very easily trust you with my money too? It's a sensitive subject. I hope you're able to take something away from it. It does, maybe even feel a little bit awkward, even for myself sitting here talking about it, but it's something that is so crucial to what we associate with church. Giving is just as much of a component as our worship experience, as singing, reading from the Bible, and having these communal activities. So I hope it's something that the next time that you have the opportunity to give, you're able to do it in a way that it's not just a transaction or an investment, but it's an actual statement that you are making to God that I trust you more than I trust myself. Thank you so much, and until we can meet again, God bless.